They laughed at Sweden's jet until it outmaneuvered the F-22. The cold wind swept across the snow-dusted tarmac at Lulu Air Base in northern Sweden. For the first time, the U.S. Air Force had brought its most prized possession, the F-22 Raptor, to participate in joint exercises with the Swedish Air Force. To the Americans, this was a routine show of dominance. The Raptor was undefeated in mock dogfights worldwide. To the Swedes, it was an opportunity to test their prized JAS-39 Gripen in the most unforgiving contest imaginable. Inside the hangar, Swedish pilots huddled around briefing screens, their eyes fixed on the sleek silhouette of the F-22. Some looked nervous, others skeptical. "Let's be honest," whispered one technician. "We don't stand a chance. That thing is a ghost in the sky." The room filled with uneasy chuckles. Yet one pilot, Captain Eric Lundström, stayed silent. He had flown the Gripen for years, knew its quirks, its strengths. He didn't buy into the myth of invincibility. When the Swedish commander entered, he delivered the news plainly. "Tomorrow our Gripens will go head-to-head against the Raptors. The Americans expect an easy victory. Let's show them what we can do." Laughter erupted at the back from a visiting U.S. pilot. "Don't worry, Captain, it'll be quick. We'll go easy on your jets." Eric met the man's grin with a calm stare. "We'll see." The morning briefing was tense. On one side of the table, American pilots confident, relaxed, radiating superiority. On the other, the Swedes, listening quietly, jotting notes, their pride restrained but simmering. The mission parameters were simple. 2 ship engagements, high-altitude mergers, and low-level maneuvering. "We'll keep it clean," said Major Travis Cole, the lead American pilot. "The Gripen's a fine little jet, but you're going up against the best air dominance platform ever built." The Swedes exchanged glances. Fine little jet. The word stung. Eric flipped through his checklists. He didn't need to be reminded that the Gripen weighed nearly half of the Raptor, carried fewer weapons, and lacked stealth. But he also knew what the Americans didn't. The Gripen thrived on agility, data link coordination, and unpredictability. In the locker room, his wingman, Lieutenant Sophia Berg, whispered, "Do you think we have a chance?" Eric smiled faintly. "They think the fight is decided before it begins. That's their weakness." Outside, ground crews prepared the aircraft. The Gripens, compact and almost modest beside the hulking Raptors, looked like underdogs in every sense. Yet for the Swedes, this wasn't about size. It was about proving that skill and ingenuity could outmatch raw power. The exercise was set. 2 Raptors versus 2 Gripens. David against Goliath. Once more, the first clash. The roar of engines split the Arctic silence. 4 jets thundered into the sky, contrails slicing across the pale horizon. "Falcon 1 airborne," Eric reported, his Gripen climbing smoothly. Across the frequency, Major Cole's confident voice replied, "Raptor 1 tally." At 20,000 feet, radar locks snapped on. The Raptor's stealth made them nearly invisible, but the Swedes used their ground radar network, data linked into their cockpits, to piece together the picture. "Contact, bearing 270, Sophia called." The first merge was brutal. The F-22s came screaming in, their thrust-vectoring nozzles twisting them into impossible angles. Sophia broke hard left, flares streaking. Eric rolled inverted, narrowly avoiding a simulated missile lock. "Kill on Falcon 2, an American voice crowed. Sophia had been tagged out in seconds. Now Eric was alone. The Raptor loomed behind him, closing fast. Eric pulled the Gripen into a tight barrel roll, forcing the Raptor to overshoot for a split second. His HUD lit up green. He'd had missile lock. "Kill on Raptor 2, Eric announced coolly. Silence crackled over the radio. 1 Raptor down. The remaining American pilot growled, "Not bad, Sweden, but now it's just you and me." The duel began. Underdog tactics. The Raptor pushed into a vertical climb, trying to drag Eric into a slow-speed fight where stealth and thrust vectoring ruled, but Eric refused to follow. Instead, he dove low, skimming the icy forests below, using the terrain to break radar contact. "Falcon 1, you're not going to run forever," Cole taunted. Eric grinned inside his oxygen mask. Running wasn't the plan. The Gripen's smaller frame gave it an edge in tight low-level turns. Eric weaved between valleys, pulling maneuvers the Raptor couldn't risk at that altitude. His data link fed him Cole's position from Swedish ground radar. Suddenly, Eric yanked the stick back, rolling into a high G-split as the Raptor, charging in at supersonic speed, nearly overshot. Eric's HUD screamed missile lock again. "Kill on Raptor 1, Eric said calmly. Back at base, the control room erupted in disbelief. The scoreboard now read, Gripen 2, Raptor 2. The exercise controllers called, "Knock it off." The round was over. In the debrief, the Americans tried to brush it off. "Beginner's luck," Cole muttered. But deep down, he knew he'd been forced to work harder than expected. For Eric, it was just the beginning. Raising the stakes, word spread quickly through the base. Swedish crews whispered in pride. The Americans grew defensive. Another round was scheduled, this time with expanded parameters, multi-ship combat, unrestricted maneuvers. "Gentlemen and lady," the Swedish commander said, glancing at Sophia, "today we fight on our terms." The Americans scoffed. but their expressions betrayed tension. In the ready room, Sophia leaned closer to Eric. "They underestimated us once. They won't again." "Good," Eric replied. "That means this time, the victory will sting even more." As they walked to their jets, one American pilot sneered, "Enjoy your little win. Lightning doesn't strike twice." Eric strapped in, his mind razor-focused. "Let's make history. Falcon flight." The second round would be bigger, faster, and far more dangerous. Sky chess, the second exercise of the day, was designed to be decisive. No excuses, no half measures. 8 fighters would launch into the frigid skies above the Baltic. 4 F-22 Raptors against 4 Swedish Jas-39 Gripen. The scenario was simply a superiority battle. The rules, there were none. As the briefing ended, Eric adjusted his gloves and exchanged a nod with Sophia. Both knew the Americans were hungry to reclaim their pride. The Gripens had surprised them once, then twice. Now, with full tactical freedom, the Raptors would unleash their dominance. Engines roared to life. One by one, the aircraft taxied to the runway, their canopies glinting under the pale northern sun. The Raptors looked predatory, their angular frames swallowing the light. The Gripens, smaller and sleeker, almost looked out of place beside them, like knives facing sledgehammers. "Falcon flight, check-in," Eric's calm voice echoed in the intercom. "Falcon 2, green. Falcon 3, green. Falcon 4, green." Above the control tower, Swedish and American officers crowded around radar screens. Everyone knew this wasn't just an exercise anymore, it was a battle for pride. The jets screamed into the sky, splitting into formations as they climbed over the Baltic Sea. The Raptors went high, banking on stealth, using their altitude advantage to pounce unseen. The Gripens spread out low, weaving across the water, their data link knitting together a picture from multiple angles. "Contacts, 50 miles. Angels, 3-5, Falcon 3 reported." He couldn't see the Raptors directly, but the network of Swedish ground-based radar, fused into the Gripen's cockpit displays, painted their position like ghosts on the glass. Eric's mind worked like a chess master. Falcons, spread to bait, 3 and 4 flank, stay unpredictable. The Americans were playing their game long-range dominance. A sharp tone filled Falcon 3's cockpit. "Missile lock." Seconds later, his jet shook violently. The exercise controller's voice came cold and final. "Falcon 3, you're dead." "Damn," Falcon 3 muttered, peeling off. But his sacrifice wasn't wasted. His wide maneuver had forced one Raptor to reveal its position. Falcon 4, lurking unseen at low altitude, popped up like a jackal. He fired his HUD, confirming a lock. "Kill on Raptor 3, Falcon 4 shouted, adrenaline in his voice. The scoreboard lit up, 3 jets down, 5 left alive. The fight dissolved into chaos. Contrails twisted as pilots pulled bone-crushing turns, each jet straining at its aerodynamic limits. Missiles streaked across the sky like comets, flares blossomed, and the radio erupted with overlapping calls. Falcon 4 went next. "I'm hit, knock off." His voice crackled, frustration laced with resignation. That left Eric and Sophia against 2 Raptors. "Falcon 2, stay with me," Eric ordered. Major Cole's voice snarled through the net. "It's over, Lundstrom. You can't win 2-on-2. Quit while you're ahead." Eric smirked. "We'll see." Eric smirked. "We'll see." Cole dove from above, his Raptors screaming like thunder. Eric jerked into a defensive break, the GI forces crushing his chest. The Raptor's nose followed with inhuman precision, thrust vectoring, keeping it glued on his tail. Sophia swooped in, firing a simulated missile. Cole broke right, dodging cleanly. The second Raptor pounced on her, and she barely shook it with a burst of countermeasures. It became a deadly dance for jets twisting, rolling, and lunging at impossible angles. Every second was a gamble, every move a calculation. Then, Eric saw his opening. Cole was pressing too hard, diving too steep. Eric cut throttle, yanking the stick back into a brutal cobra maneuver. His Gripen's nose pitched up like a striking snake, bleeding speed instantly. The Raptor shot past, overshooting. For a split second, the hunter became the prey. Eric's HUD screamed with missile lock. "Kill on Raptor 1, he called, steady despite the pounding of his heart. Cole cursed over the net. "No way, no damn way." The last Raptor, desperate, broke into a high-G climb to escape Sophia, but she and Eric moved like wolves closing a trap. Eric drove the Raptor downward, while Sophia boxed him in from the side. The American pilot pulled, rolled, fought, but every move was predicted, every escape route cut off. Sophia's voice came cool and sharp. "Kill on Raptor 4. Silence followed. The controllers confirmed. Exercise over. Gripens victorious. In the control tower, jaws dropped. Officers exchanged looks of disbelief, for Swedish Gripens, written off as second-rate, had just outmaneuvered 4 F-22 Raptors in a battle that should have been impossible. Eric leaned back in his seat, sweat running down his neck. His breathing was ragged, but his voice was calm as he keyed the radio. "Falcon flight, good work. That's how we fight." Somewhere in the distance, Cole's voice came, strained but grudging. "You got us this time, Lundstrom, but next round." Eric cut him off with quiet finality. There won't always be a next round. The sky above the Baltic was theirs, the fallout. The hangar was unusually quiet when the Gripens and Raptors rolled back in. Normally the air buzzed with laughter, shouts and teasing remarks after an exercise. Not this time. The engines wound down, the canopies cracked open, and the only sounds were hissing hydraulics and the crunch of boots on the frozen tarmac. Inside the debriefing room, the atmosphere was heavier still. Pilots, technicians, and commanders from both nations gathered around the big display screens. The scoreboard told the story in cold, unforgiving numbers. Raptors 4 losses, Gripens 2 losses. The Swedish Air Force had won. No one wanted to speak first. Major Travis Cole sat stiffly, arms crossed, jaw clenched. His crew had always believed in the myth of invincibility. To lose once could be explained away. To lose twice in succession, in front of their hosts, was harder to swallow. Finally, an American officer broke the silence. This doesn't change the facts. The F-22 remains the world's premier air dominance fighter. It wasn't designed for these unusual conditions. The Swedes shifted in their chairs, some suppressing smiles, others too polite to react. Their commander, Colonel Henrik Dahl, leaned forward. His voice was calm but edged with steel. Unusual conditions. Flying against a thinking, maneuvering opponent is the very definition of air combat. If you call that unusual, then perhaps we see the battlefield differently. Cole's fists tightened. With respect, Colonel, in real war, you'd never see us fight without a WACS tankers and the rest of the US machine. These results don't prove what you think they do. At the far end of the table, Captain Eric Lundstrom finally spoke. His voice was measured, not triumphant. We don't pretend the Gripen is a better machine on paper. The Raptor has stealth, supercruise, thrust vectoring capabilities we can't match, but today proved something else. That even the best jet in the world can be surprised if its pilot underestimates the fight. For a moment, no one replied. The Americans exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia Berg, sitting beside Eric, added softly, "We don't have the luxury of overwhelming numbers or global infrastructure. We survive by using what we have smarter. That's what these exercises are about, isn't it?" The Swedish technicians watching from the back gave the faintest nods of agreement. Cole exhaled sharply through his nose, leaning back in his chair. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, but his tone lacked conviction. He knew what had happened up there. Every pilot in the room did. The Swedish commander let the silence linger before closing the folder in front of him. "Gentlemen, I believe the results speak for themselves. We don't claim superiority, we only claim credibility. That is all Sweden ever wanted." The room broke into murmurs. The Americans avoided eye contact, their usual swagger replaced by quiet reflection. For them, the shock wasn't just losing it, was realizing that the legend of the F-22 wasn't untouchable. Later in the locker room, Sophia pulled off her helmet and slumped against the bench. Her face was still flushed from adrenaline. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "We actually beat them. Twice." Eric unzipped his flight suit, sitting across from her. His expression was calm, almost stoic. "They thought the fight was decided before it began. That was their mistake. It won't happen again." "Do you think they'll want a rematch?" she asked. He gave a faint smile. "Of course, pride demands it, and when it comes, we'll be ready." Outside, the northern sky was fading into twilight. The Gripens stood on the apron, their canopies frosting over in the cold. They were small, modest fighters by global standards, but tonight they seemed to loom taller, their silhouettes sharper against the horizon. No one in that hangar would laugh at them again. The Americans weren't satisfied. Pride couldn't allow it. After the second defeat, Major Travis Cole stepped forward in the debriefing room and locked eyes with Eric Lundstrom. "One last engagement." He demanded. "No teams, no networks, no ground radar, just you, me, and our jets. Pure one-on-one." The Swedes exchanged glances. Sophia leaned toward Eric and whispered, "He's furious." "You don't have to do this." Eric kept his gaze steady on Cole. "I'll do it." His voice was calm, but his blood stirred. This was the challenge he had been waiting for. The terms were set. A duel at high altitude. Guns and missiles simulated. No outside support. Just pilot versus pilot. Raptor versus Gripen. The jets roared into the pale sky, climbing side by side before peeling away to their starting positions. At 40,000 feet, the cold air shimmered, contrails painting thin streaks across the heavens. "Raptor 1 ready." Cole's voice crackled over the radio, tight with anticipation. "Falcon 1 ready," Eric replied, his tone controlled. The controller's voice cut in. "Fights on." Immediately, Cole went vertical, pushing the Raptor into a steep climb, banking on his thrust vectoring advantage. Eric didn't bite. Instead, he rolled his Gripen into a fast dive, cutting across the lower band of sky, refusing to be dragged into Cole's fight. Cole laughed over the net. "Running already? That's not how you win, Captain." Eric smiled inside his mask. "I'm not running. I'm waiting." The Raptor swooped down like a falcon, nose pointed directly at him. Eric yanked the stick hard right, pulling into a high G brake. The Gripen shuddered as the strain pressed him into the seat, but the missile lock tone in his headset vanished. "Close," Cole muttered, circling back. The duel became a deadly ballet. They climbed, dove, and rolled, each testing the other's limits. The Raptor moved with raw power, able to twist its nose into impossible angles. The Gripen, lighter and more nimble, turned tighter arcs, cutting corners in ways Cole hadn't expected. Minutes felt like hours. Both pilots were drenched in sweat, breathing hard through oxygen masks, muscles screaming under relentless G. Cole pressed again, locking onto Eric's 6 o'clock, lining him up for the kill. "Got you now," he growled. Eric's instincts screamed. At the last second, he cut throttle and yanked into a Cobra maneuver, his Gripen's nose pitched straight up, his speed bleeding off violently. The Raptor shot past him, overshooting by a fraction of a second. Now the tables turned. Eric rolled inverted, dropping onto Cole's tail. His HUD lit up green lock. "Kill on Raptor 1, Eric said evenly. For a moment, there was only static. Then Cole's voice came back, strained and disbelieving. "No, that can't be right." But it was. The control tower confirmed. "Falcon 1, valid kill. Engagement over." Eric eased his jet out of the maneuver, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He could feel his hands trembling against the stick, but he kept his voice calm as he replied, "Copy. Returning to base." Cole stayed silent for several seconds before finally speaking. His voice was lower now, not mocking but heavy with reluctant respect. "You fly well, Lundstrom. Better than most I've faced." Eric didn't gloat. "And you remind me that no jet, no matter how advanced, is unbeatable. In the end, it's always the pilot." As the two jets banked back toward Lulu, the northern sky stretched wide and endless around them. One small Gripen, one mighty Raptor, two warriors who had tested each other at the edge of their limits. And on this day, the underdog had proven itself. Silence in the hangar. The hangar at Lulu Air Base felt like a cathedral after a sermon, silent, heavy with unspoken thoughts. The Gripen and the Raptor rolled to a stop side by side, steam rising from their engines into the freezing twilight. Ground crews rushed forward, but even their chatter was subdued. Eric popped his canopy and removed his helmet. His face was pale from the G-forces, but his eyes burned steady. Across the tarmac, Major Cole did the same. Their gazes met for the briefest moment, two men who had just pushed each other to the limits of man and machine. Inside, the pilots filed into the ready room. Normally, these sessions were filled with jokes, laughter, and exaggerated retellings of near misses. Tonight, no one laughed. The scoreboard projected onto the wall told the story in stark clarity. Gripen 1 kill, Raptor 1 loss. The Americans sat stiff, their earlier confidence now replaced by something heavier: disbelief. For them, the F-22 was not just an aircraft. It was a symbol of U.S. air power, of decades of technological dominance. To see it defeated, even in a controlled duel, was like watching a myth crack. Cole finally broke the silence. He stood slowly, helmet still in his hand, and looked directly at Eric. His jaw was tight, but his voice was steady. "You fly well, Captain. Better than most I've faced." Eric nodded once, not smiling, not gloating. "Thank you. The Raptor is an incredible machine, but no jet is invincible. That's the lesson." For a moment, no one moved. Then Sophia spoke up, her voice softer but carrying across the room. "And that's why we train together. To remind ourselves that technology alone doesn't win the fight. Pilots do." The Americans said nothing, but the words hung in the air like a quiet verdict. As the room slowly emptied, Eric lingered near the window, staring out at the Gripen parked under floodlights. The little fighter looked almost modest compared to the hulking silhouette of the Raptor beside it. Yet tonight, it stood taller than ever. No one in that hangar would laugh at it again. Legacy of the Gripen. The exercise was over, but its echoes spread far beyond the snow-covered runways of Lulu. News traveled quickly through military channels, whispered first in mess halls, then in briefing rooms, and finally across the Atlantic. The Gripen had outmaneuvered the Raptor. Analysts scrambled for explanations. Some dismissed the outcome as an anomaly, unrealistic training conditions, they said. Others praised it as proof that smaller air forces could still innovate and challenge giants. In think tanks and war colleges, the debate ignited: was the age of single, untouchable superjets already ending? For the Swedes, the answer was simpler. They had never set out to humiliate the Americans, nor to prove the Gripen superior. Their goal had been credibility, to show that their aircraft and their pilots deserved respect. And now, respect had been earned the hard way. On the final evening, the Swedish pilots gathered in the hangar. The Gripens sat parked in neat rows, their canopies fogged by the cold, their wings catching the last glow of the Arctic sun. Eric walked slowly between them, running a gloved hand along the smooth fuselage of his jet. To outsiders, it looked unremarkable, small, compact, even plain. But to him, it was a weapon honed by necessity, a partner that had never failed him. "They laughed at you," he whispered quietly, almost to himself. "But today, they stopped." Sophia joined him, her helmet tucked under her arm. "Do you think they'll ever admit it openly?" she asked. Eric shook his head with a faint smile. "Maybe not. Some victories are too bitter to acknowledge, but they'll remember. Every time they see a Gripen in the sky, they'll remember." Outside, the American Raptors were being prepared for departure. Their crews worked with their usual precision, but without their usual swagger. The Swedes watched silently, not gloating, only thoughtful. For all the rivalry, they knew the day had forged something rare: mutual respect. When the last jet lifted off into the darkening horizon, Eric stood at the edge of the runway, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the sky. The cold wind whipped across his face, but inside, a quiet warmth settled. The Gripen had proven itself. Not the biggest, not the fastest, not the stealthiest, but clever, agile, and unyielding. A fighter that carried with it the spirit of a nation that refused to be underestimated. And in that moment, Eric knew, legends are not born of myths, they are forged in the sky.